My name's Frank, and until last week, I was a firm believer that Bigfoot was a cheap costume in a B-movie. Now, I drive with the high beams on, even in broad daylight. It was 1:17 a.m., according to the flickering clock on my dash. I was driving a late-night haul, medical supplies, from Asheville to a smaller hospital deep in the Blue Ridge foothills. To shave an hour off the trip, I took Route 38, a narrow, winding old highway everyone avoids. It was fine for the first hour. Just me, the roar of the diesel engine, and the comforting static of the radio. Then, the air changed. The trees pressed closer, the road darkened, and the feeling of being watched, that cold pinprick on the back of your neck, became palpable. I gripped the wheel tighter. The collision happened so fast it was a blur of sound and motion. A massive dark shape, far bigger than any deer, exploded out of the ditch and right into my front fender. The impact was not sharp. It was a heavy, skinning thud that shook the whole cab. My truck groaned, stalled, and slid to a grinding stop. The silence that followed was the worst part, thick, absolute, and unnatural. My nose was stinging from the airbag chemicals, but I was otherwise fine. The engine, however, was definitely dead. I fumbled for my phone. No signal, of course. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and stepped out. The air hit me, cold, damp, and smelling strongly of pine. And something else, something musky, like a wet dog that had rolled in a carcass. I swung the beam toward the front of the truck. The grille was crumpled, and there was a dark, matted patch of thick, oily hair sticking to the cracked plastic of the bumper. The impact had been severe, but whatever I hit was not there anymore. There was no body, no blood trail leading away, nothing. Just a cratered patch of dirt where it had launched itself. I started moving the beam slowly along the perimeter of the truck, searching the ditches. That is when I heard it, not a branch snapping, but something heavier, a deep, wet thump. It sounded like a massive, heavy sack of meat being deliberately dropped on the ground, maybe 50 yards into the blackness of the trees. I froze. Thump. A few seconds later, from a different direction. Thump, thump. Now they were rhythmic, slow, and circling. Whatever it was huge, moving on 2 legs, and trying to communicate, or intimidate. My heart was doing a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I scrambled back into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and kept the flashlight beam pointed at the woods, shining through the shattered windshield. For 10 minutes the thumping continued, getting steadily closer, always staying just beyond the reach of my lights. I tried the ignition again and again. Nothing. Then the thumping stopped completely. The woods went utterly silent. I strained my ears, hearing only the frantic blood rushing in my own head. I watched the periphery of the beam, and there it was. Not a shape, but a pair of eyes, reflecting my light, with a dull yellow-green malevolence. They were set impossibly wide apart, low to the ground. Then the eyes rose, slowly, steadily, until they were looking directly into the cab, level with my door window. It was impossibly tall, a hulking mass of shadow and thick, dark fur. It was the size of a small car, yet silent. It did not move fast. It just reached out one hand, a monstrous hand, with fingers as thick as my wrist, and laid it flat against my driver's side door, inches from my head. I did not hear a sound at first, just felt the vibration, then the sickening grinding noise of metal under impossible pressure. I screamed, not a yell of defiance, but pure, animal terror. I hammered the ignition again, twisting the key and praying. The engine cord sputtering violently, then roared. I slammed the truck into drive, turning the wheel and flooring the pedal. The giant beast did not react. It was still looking in. As the truck lunged forward, the momentum dragged the door across its hand, and I heard a final tearing schluck that was louder than the engine. I did not stop for an hour. The next morning, back in my depot, I surveyed the damage in the harsh fluorescent light. The front fender was a mess, but the real horror was on the driver's door. Where the creature's hand had rested, the steel was not just dented, it was peeled back slightly. And etched across the metal, running from the lock to the window frame, was a set of 4 parallel gouges, each one half an inch deep, not scratches, claw marks. They were the size of dinner knives and looked like they had been scored by something that did not just scratch metal, but tore it like wet cardboard. The beast had not just touched my truck. It had left its calling card. I now know it is out there, curious and impossibly strong. It was well past 2:00 a.m., and I was deep into the kind of interstate hypnosis that only happens after 12 hours of driving alone. I was in the middle of Missouri, stretched highway so dark the stars felt close enough to touch. That is, when the tire blew. Not a slow leak, but a catastrophic kerfump whoosh that yanked me violently back to reality and sent the car fishtailing dangerously toward the median. I wrestled the wheel, slowed to a crawl, and managed to pull onto the shoulder. The silence, once the engine was off, was instant and oppressive. I hated it. I flipped on the hazard lights, small, futile, yellow sparks, against the crushing black, and sighed, grabbing my roadside kit. I had not even found the jack yet, when a pair of bright white headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, slowing down. A new model black SUV pulled up 50 feet behind me. A man in his mid-30s got out, wearing a clean, dark jacket and jeans. He had an easy, concerned look on his face. "Tire trouble, huh?" "Nasty sound that was," said, approaching with a large, industrial flashlight. "I have got one of those hydraulic jacks if yours is giving you trouble." Relief washed over me. He seemed genuinely helpful. "Man, you are a lifesaver." "Yeah." It blew the front driver's side. He nodded and shone his light on my license plate. "I am David, by the way," he said, holding out a hand. I shook it. "Jake, thanks again." We walked around to the trunk together, and he helped me pull out the spare. As we worked, he started talking, keeping his voice casual. "So, you headed far, Jake?" "San Antonio," I replied. "Caught a family emergency." "Oh, that is rough." "I just came from San Antonio myself. Nice city. You know, I think I saw your car parked outside that little cafe on Main Street, the Daily Grind, yesterday afternoon. Small world." My stomach went cold. I had not stopped at a cafe on Main Street yesterday. I had been at my apartment on Elm Street packing. I had never told anyone where I was driving from, let alone where I lived. I forced a laugh. Must be a different guy. Lots of silver Fords on the road. He did not laugh back. Instead, he shone his powerful flashlight directly onto my driver's license, which was clipped to my sun visor. The beam was so bright, it reflected off the laminated surface, momentarily blinding me. "Nah," he said, his voice hardening, losing all its neighborly warmth. "I do not think so, Jake. Same haircut, same build, even the same little scar over your left eyebrow. You look like you need a better friend." I knew I was in trouble. This was not a casual mugging. This was a targeted, prepared setup. He did not want my wallet. He wanted me. Before I could react, the SUV behind him flicked off its headlights, plunging the entire scene into pitch blackness. In the momentary confusion, I spun toward my trunk and grabbed the heavy iron lug wrench. I heard David shout, "Grab him, he has got the wrench." Another figure materialized out of the SUV's shadow, huge and fast. I swung the wrench wildly, connecting with something hard that grunted in pain. I did not wait for a second chance. I bolted, scrambling over the guardrail and plunging into the ditch, ignoring the sharp pain of a twisted ankle. I kept running perpendicular to the road, low to the ground, listening to the pounding feet and shouts behind me. I heard a muffled exchange, then a metallic snapping sound that I instinctively knew was a round being chambered. "He will not get far, David. He's got a bad knee, remember. Check the log." The log. My medical file, my profile. They had not just followed me, they had studied me. I hid beneath a thicket of scrub brush, heart hammering, trying to regulate my breathing. The searchlights, powerful directional beams, started scanning the field, coming from the road above. They were systematic and thorough, moving in wide, overlapping sweeps. I stayed silent, pressed flat into the dirt, listening to their boots crunching on the gravel far above. I heard the SUV's door open again, followed by the distant sound of my car door being wrenched open. They were taking their time, knowing I could not run far and could not call for help. When the searchlights finally moved past, I crawled deeper into the dark, whispering one horrifying thought to myself. My car is still on the shoulder. My entire life still on my shoulders. It took 3 hours for the sun to rise enough for me to crawl to the next highway exit and find a truck stop. I never called the police about the car, knowing that whatever information they took from it, passwords, documents, my life, was already out there, and that they had been looking for Jake for a long, long time. I changed my name, sold what I could through a third party, and never drove a silver Ford again. I know they did not catch me, but I also know they did not fail. They just took my identity and left me with the keys to an empty life. Back in 2008, I had a terrifying night. I will never forget. The moment the engine sputtered and died, the silence swallowed everything. It was not just quiet. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a place where nobody belonged. 32 years old, late on a Tuesday night, and I was stranded on a nameless stretch of highway, somewhere between Nashville and nowhere, having foolishly trusted the E on my gas gauge. I checked my phone. No signal, naturally. The faint smell of damp earth and pine needles was all I had for company. My only option was the faint glow on the horizon, 20 minutes back, the way I would come. Was a single neon open sign marking a solitary gas station. The walk was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every rustle in the overgrown ditches, every shadow cast by the quarter moon, felt like a silent spectator. I walked slowly, hyper-aware, scanning the roadside. An empty road, an empty ditch, nothing but the ribbon of asphalt stretching out. I saw no parked cars, no flashing hazards, and no sign of mechanical distress anywhere on that stretch. I bought the gas, a heavy red plastic container, and started the return journey, the clanking of the gas can against my leg echoing too loudly in the night. Finally, I made it back to my sedan. My heart hammered with relief. I poured the gas, hopped in, and the engine coughed once, then roared to life. I put the car in drive, ready to get the hell out of there, when I saw him. A figure was emerging from the darkness up the road, the direction I had just walked. He was a tall man, walking with a steady, unhurried pace. I held my breath and watched as he approached. When he was about 10 yards away, he raised a hand. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. There were no broken-down cars. I had just walked the entire distance. Had he been hiding? He reached my window, that bent slightly, his face obscured by the low angle of the moonlight. "Evening," he said, his voice flat and dusty. "My truck's died, just up the road. The starter motor's gone. You would not happen to have a spare jump, or be heading to the next town, would you?" My response was a short, sharp breath. You just warped that entire stretch. There was no truck, not even a car is parked." His smile did not reach his eyes. "Well, that's strange. Must have been hard to spot in the dark. I could really use a lift to call for a tow." I was not having it. I leaned across the center console and pressed the lock button again, ensuring all doors were securely locked. Then, I angled the nose of my car sharply toward him, positioning the front bumper right in the center of the road. I wanted the cold steel of the car between us. "Sorry, but I am not stopping," I mumbled. He took a step back, and his eyes, which I could now see clearly, were wide and strangely devoid of reflection. He started moving around the front of the car, heading toward the driver's side. Panic flared. I quickly cracked my window down an inch, planning to yell at him to back off. He was fast. Before I could retract my hand from the power window switch, he was right next to the glass. He did not speak. He'd just lunged, his hand slamming onto the frame of my door, a glint of something silver catching the moonlight. I did not wait. I did not think. I jammed my foot onto the accelerator, steering hard to the left. The tires screamed against the asphalt, throwing gravel into the night. As I peeled out, the engine whining in protest, I heard it, a horrifying thwack, a sound like something heavy, solid, and metallic, hitting the rear quarter panel, followed by a grating shh noise that was instantly swallowed by the roar of the tires. I did not slow down until the gas station's neon sign was nothing more than a faint memory in my rearview mirror. When I finally pulled into my garage 3 hours later, the terror had settled into a dull, cold ache. My hands were shaking too much to turn off the engine right away. I grabbed a flashlight and forced myself to walk around the car, expecting a dent, maybe a scratch. I found it on the rear quarter panel, near the passenger side taillight. Sticking through the metal, embedded deeply in the sheet metal, like a terrible sharp pin, was a hunting knife. The blade was about 8 inches long, and the hilt, now exposed to the garage light, was smeared with mud and some dark, viscous liquid. The metallic sound had not been an impact. It had been the knife finding purchase. He had not just thrown it, he had driven it into the car as I sped away. I was 24, halfway to Denver, and convinced I could stretch one more tank of gas through the vast empty expanse of eastern Colorado. The car disagreed. At 1:45 a.m., on a 2-lane state highway with 0 cell service, my sedan coughed its last, sad, expensive breath and rolled to a stop on the shoulder. It was not just dark, it was cold and deeply, profoundly lonely. I turned on the hazards, the only sign of life for miles, and immediately felt like bait. I decided to wait inside, door locked, hoping for the first passing car. 10 minutes went by, then 20, marked only by the repetitive tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. Just as I was starting to doze, the quiet was broken by a sound that made every muscle tense. A slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. It was not coming from the road or the engine. It was coming from the rear of the car, specifically the trunk lid. I held my breath, gripping the steering wheel. Was it the wind? No, it was too regular, too intentional. Tap, tap, tap. Then the tapping stopped. Then I heard a heavy scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across the fiberglass of the bumper. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew, with the kind of primal certainty you cannot logic away, that someone or something was touching my car. I fumbled for my emergency flashlight, clicked it on, and held it low, pointing it toward the passenger floor. I did not dare shine it outside. The scratching moved to the driver's side rear window. It was not the sound of metal or glass breaking, but a soft, unsettling friction. Then, a low, wet sound, like someone slowly dragging their tongue across the cold glass. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering, "Go away, please go away." A shadow moved into my peripheral vision. I flinched, slamming my head against the headrest. The shadow was immense, taller than the car, and standing right outside my driver's window. I slowly raised the flashlight, intending to flash the beam right into its face and floor the car, even if it only moved 50 feet. But as the light traveled up the figure, I froze. It was not a man. It was too tall and too thin, with long, spindly limbs, and it was wearing a large, crude mask, something made of burlap or old leather, with eye holes cut out, that stared directly at me. Then its hand appeared. It was not human. The fingers were unnaturally long and jointed, tipped with black, polished nails that clicked softly against window glass. The creature raised its index finger and slowly, painstakingly, traced a single downward line through the condensation on the window. I could not scream. I could only stare at the line, which looked like a tear, or perhaps an attempt to draw the number 1. At that exact terrifying moment, the world was invaded by light and sound. The ground began to vibrate, and 2 colossal horns of chrome and white light appeared in my side mirror, followed by the roar of a powerful diesel engine gearing down. Semi-truck, a huge 18-wheeler hauling lumber, was bearing down on my sedan. The trucker, sensing something was wrong with the lone car and the figure beside it, laid on his air horn. The sound was deafening, a shattering blast that cut through the silence, like a physical blow. Creature's head snapped up. It turned from my window, its impossibly tall frame momentarily illuminated in the truck's massive headlights. Then, with an agility that defied its size, it dropped into the ditch and vanished into the darkness. The semi, its air brakes hissing, pulled to a stop just in front of my car, blocking the road entirely. A big man in a plaid shirt jumped out, looking furious and concerned all at once. "You okay, kid? What in the hell was that?" I could only point a trembling finger toward the ditch. There was someone right there. The trucker, named Hank, walked around my car, his large boot crunching the gravel. He saw the single oily line traced on my window and the faint drag marks on my bumper. He did not say he believed me, but he did not say he did not either. "Well, you are out of gas, and you are in a bad spot," he declared matter-of-factly. "You ride with me to the next exit. We will call a tow, get you somewhere with light." As I scrambled into the safety of his high-up, roaring cab, I looked back. The only thing left on the desolate shoulder was my little sedan, its taillights blinking yellow into the terrifying blackness, waiting for whatever was out there to return. I did not care about the car. I just knew I was alive.